In the 7th century, a settlement named Caloes was located on the banks of the Scheldt River. The exact extent of this area is unclear, but it is believed to have stretched from the current Hoogstraat to the Kiel. During this era, missionaries traveled all around Europe, trying to convert pagan populations to Christianity. In this period, 3 missionaries visited the area along the Scheldt River. The first was Eloy, a Frankish bishop, who embarked on a mission trip in Flanders around 640. It is in his Vita, or life story, that the city name Antwerpis is first found in a document. Eloy's mission to convert the local pagans was not particularly successful, and a few years later, a compatriot, Amandus, made a new attempt. According to historical sources, Amandus founded a church dedicated to the saints Peter and Paul. Most historians suspect that this church may have been located near the current Sint-Michielstraat, although no archaeological evidence has been found so far. Several decades later, the Anglo-Saxon Willibrord arrives in the area. This missionary eventually becomes the Bishop of Utrecht and is also known as the Apostle of the Benelux. Subsequently, the local Antwerp elite, having acquired the church, reportedly presents it to Willibrord, hoping for a blessed afterlife. Around the year 836, the area falls victim to the plundering raids orchestrated by Vikings, resulting in widespread devastation. The Church of Peter and Paul is not spared and is burned to the ground. It is rebuilt and, this time, dedicated to Saint Michael, the patron saint of heroes and fighters. After the Vikings' attack, a second settlement emerges just north of the initial one, situated on a bulge in the river. Urban development will now focus on this new core. From the second half of the 10th century, an earthen fortification provides protective walls. Later, it is reinforced with a wooden palisade and a moat. Here, a church is also constructed, dedicated to Saint Eligius and Saint Walburga, a British religious figure who travelled from Antwerp to Bavaria. In the first half of the 11th century, a pre-Romanesque chapel of Our Lady is erected outside this fortification. In this drawing, we also see the St. Walburgis Church within the city walls and the St. Michael's Church in the south. In 1124, the 12 canons of St. Michael's Church lead a very worldly lifestyle. As a result, the bishop finds it necessary to call upon Norbert to restore order. Norbert encourages the clergy to lead a more regular life in a tighter community. 4 of them agree and establish an abbey. The St. Michael's Church is transformed into the St. Michael's Abbey. The remaining 8 canons prefer a more independent status and move to the vicinity of the Chapel of Our Lady. This chapel is elevated to the Antwerp Parish Church, and around this time, it is decided to replace the small chapel with a larger Romanesque church. During excavations in the second half of the 20th century, remnants of this church were discovered. The drawing shows a reconstruction of the floor plan of the Romanesque church within the current Gothic church. Most likely, this church had the same appearance as Saint Maria im Capitol in Cologne. Around 1200, major fortification works are carried out, and the surface of the city doubles. The church is now within the city walls. Between 1295 and 1314, the city's ramparts are expanded again. This expansion is indicated in yellow on this map. Around that time, Antwerp has approximately 6,000 residents. In the mid-14th century, this population rises to about 10,000. In 1345, the Gothic Notre Dame Cathedral is completed in Paris. In Antwerp, the decision is made to follow the Parisian trend, and in 1353, the construction of a new Gothic church begins. These works will last for more than a century and a half. Around 1400, the city undergoes another expansion, marked in brown on the map. Antwerp now has about 20,000 inhabitants. In 1413, the first part of the new church, the choir, is completed. The largest part of the old Romanesque church is preserved to minimize disruption to daily church activities. In 1420, the groundwork for the northern tower is established, and by 1430, the foundations for the southern tower are laid. This defines the final dimensions of the ground plan. Over the years, it becomes evident that there is not enough space. This shortage is not due to an overwhelming number of people attending the same worship service, but rather because a parish church, especially the main church, serves as a gathering place for various devotions and venerations, each requiring its own prayer area or chapel. Therefore, during the construction of the church, it is decided to expand it, not in length, as that was no longer possible due to the towers already being under construction, but in width. 2 side aisles are added. This brings the total number of aisles to 7 and increases the overall width to more than 53 meters. This church will become the largest in the Low Countries. This image shows how the church appeared around 1475. Throughout the 15th century, the new Gothic church existed in 2 halves, gradually being completed towards each other. It wasn't until the 1480s that the final section of the Romanesque church, which had served as the bell tower until then, was demolished. In 1492, Christopher Columbus discovers America. This drawing shows how the Gothic church looked around that time. During the 15th century, Antwerp experienced significant growth in size, prosperity, and population, coinciding with the construction of the new Gothic church. By 1500, the city boasts approximately 40,000 inhabitants, making it exceptionally large for that era. This upward trajectory continues into the first half of the 16th century, with increasing prosperity leaving its mark on the city's architecture. One notable example is the construction of the Butcher's Hall in 1501. The construction of the large tower of the church is meanwhile ongoing. Here we see the progress in 1508, 1514, and 1515. In 1518, the Great Tower of the Gothic church reaches completion, representing the zenith of the church's construction at an impressive height of 123 meters. Meanwhile, the population has increased to approximately 60,000 inhabitants. This makes Antwerp one of the largest cities north of the Alps, and the city becomes the center of world trade. Its revenues have never been higher. Partly due to the splendid economic prospects, the crafts and guilds aim to double the size of the church. This project is named the New Work, and the first stone is laid by none other than Emperor Charles V himself. The beginning of this project can still be seen in the layout of the streets to the east of the church. In 1533, disaster strikes. A poorly extinguished candle near an altar close to the North Tower ignites a fire. The wooden roof covering catches fire and falls, blazing into the church. The damage is immense. The furniture and pillars of the central nave suffer heavy damage. During the restoration at the end of the 20th century, the damaged columns came to light. The fire brings an end to the megalomaniacal dream of the new work. In 1559, the Church of Our Lady is chosen as the seat of the newly established Diocese of Antwerp. Consequently, it attains the official status of the city's cathedral. The elevation to cathedral makes little impression on the Calvinist organizers of the iconoclastic fury that ravages here in 1566. 15 years later, in 1581, when Antwerp is entirely under the control of the Protestants, especially Calvinists, a purification of the churches is implemented. Many medieval art treasures are destroyed, while others are removed and safeguarded. When the city falls back into the hands of the Spaniards in 1585, all churches are once again dedicated to Catholic worship. A new art-loving spirit emerges in the spirit of the Counter-Reformation. The church is adorned once more with many altars for guilds and trades, but now in the new fashion of the Baroque. At this time, Peter Paul Rubens comes into the picture. He will be one of the first to paint a large altarpiece for one of the guilds. Thus, the cathedral becomes abundantly filled again in the Baroque era. More than 200 years after the iconoclasm, the cathedral faces another upheaval as the French impose their revolutionary rule, leading to a complete emptying of the sacred space. During this period, the French seize the most precious art treasures, including renowned paintings by artists such as Rubens, and transport them to Paris. In a grim turn of events, there is even a looming threat of complete demolition. City architect Jan Blum is assigned the task of drawing up plans and specifications for the potential destruction of the cathedral. However, a significant turning point occurred with the Concordat of 1801 between Napoleon and Pope Pius VII. This agreement paved the way for the reconfiguration of the immense space, allowing it to be restored and used once again as a church. Following the Battle of Waterloo in 1815, the French occupation in the region comes to an end. This marked a crucial moment as most of the paintings, which had been taken to Paris, were returned to their original place in the church. From the mid-19th century onward, a revival of Gothic artistry led to a genuine Neo-gothic resurgence, featuring dozens of stained glass windows, a monumental choir stall, side altars in the choir, and radiating chapels. In 1961, Antwerp becomes an independent diocese once again. As a result, the main church regains its title of cathedral, which it had lost since the French occupation at the end of the 18th century.